My name is Thomas, and for the last 2 years I've been working the overnight shift at a Burger King in my town. It's nothing special, but it keeps my bills paid and the schedule fits my lifestyle. I've always preferred staying up late anyway, so working the drive-thru from 10 p.m. until 4 a.m. never really bothered me the way it does most people. Everything started about a month ago during one of my usual solo shifts. After midnight, staffing gets pretty thin, so I was handling the drive-thru on my own. Around 1 a.m., a car pulled up to the speaker. A man's voice came through. Nothing about it stood out. He calmly ordered a large double Whopper with cheese meal and a Coke. Completely normal order. When he reached the payment window, something felt slightly odd. He only lowered his window just enough to slide his credit card through. His car windows were heavily tinted, so I couldn't see his face or even make out any features. I ran his card, handed back the receipt, and expected him to pull forward to pick up his food like every other customer. Instead, he just drove away. I stood there holding his bag of food, confused. I waited a few minutes, assuming he might circle back around or realized he forgot his order. But he never returned. Eventually, I set the food aside and later ended up eating it myself. Customers do strange things sometimes, so I shrugged it off and didn't give it much thought. About a week later, it happened again. Same time of night, same order, same behavior. The man paid at the first window and then drove off without collecting the food. I remember thinking it was a bizarre coincidence that someone had done the exact same thing recently. At the time, I still didn't connect it to being the same person. It wasn't until the third time that everything clicked. Same voice, same order, same disappearing act. By then, I knew this wasn't random. Something strange was going on, but honestly, I wasn't about to complain. The meals were paid for, and I was the one benefiting from them. I just accepted the free food and tried not to overthink why a stranger was basically buying me dinner every few days. This continued for several weeks. Every 4 or 5 nights, usually sometime between 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the morning, he would show up. Same meal, same quiet payment, same vanishing act. Eventually, I started half-jokingly looking forward to it, wondering if my mysterious customer would appear during my shift. Then one night, everything changed. It was around 2 a.m. and I heard his voice again through the drive-thru speaker. I already knew what he was going to order, and sure enough, he asked for the same exact meal. But before finishing, he added something that made my entire body go cold. He said, "I hope you've been enjoying those Whoppers, Mr. Hurley." Hurley is my last name. I don't wear a name tag with my last name on it. It isn't displayed anywhere customers can see. There is absolutely no legitimate reason for a random drive-thru customer to know it. I froze. My mind just stopped working for a few seconds. When I finally snapped back, I immediately asked who he was, how he knew my name, and what he wanted. I kept repeating, "Who is this?" over and over again, but he never answered. And this time, he didn't even pull forward to pay. I heard his engine rev, and then he drove away. I spent the rest of that shift completely shaken. I couldn't focus. Every sound outside made me jump. I kept telling myself it had to be some kind of prank, but deep down I felt something was seriously wrong. I didn't realize how bad it would get until I arrived home later that morning. There was a handwritten note sitting right outside my front door. It simply read, "I know what you did. You have 3 days." I stared at it, my hands trembling. I felt nauseous, like all the air had been punched out of me. I had no idea what it meant. I still don't. I spent hours trying to think of anything I could have done to make someone threaten me like that, but nothing came to mind. I live a pretty boring life. I'm 24 years old. I work fast food and spend most of my free time playing video games. I don't have enemies. I don't have dark secrets. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat on my couch with every light in my apartment turned on, waiting for something terrible to happen. But nothing did. The following night at work, though, he came back. This time, he skipped ordering food entirely. Instead, he told me to grab a pen and write something down. Before I could question him, he gave me an address on the outskirts of town, somewhere I had never heard of. Then he calmly told me I had 2 days to deliver him $10,000. I almost laughed at first. I thought it had to be a joke, but the tone in his voice told me he was dead serious. After he drove away, the fear hit me all over again. There was absolutely no way I could give him that kind of money. I didn't have it even if I wanted to. I convinced myself it had to be a scam or someone messing with me. Looking back, I should have called the police right then. But panic and confusion clouded my judgment, and I did nothing. 3 nights passed. I didn't deliver any money and nothing happened. I started hoping it was over. I was wrong. One evening after getting home from work, I was relaxing and watching TV when I suddenly heard glass shatter. I dropped to the floor instinctively, convinced someone was shooting at me. When I finally gathered enough courage to look around, I saw that a large rock had been thrown through my living room window. By the time I rushed outside, whoever did it was gone. That was when I finally called the police. I told them everything. The drive-through encounters, the note, the address, the demand for money. They said they would check out the location and increase patrols around my neighborhood. But without security footage or clear evidence, there wasn't much they could do. That was 3 days ago. Since then, I've called in sick to work every night because I'm terrified of seeing that car again. But staying home doesn't make me feel safe either, especially knowing that whoever this person is already knows where I live. I'm trapped. I can't afford to lose my job, and I definitely can't afford to move somewhere else. I've been thinking about asking the police to trace the credit card he used for those drive-through orders, hoping it might lead somewhere. Other than that, I'm completely out of ideas. I still don't know why he targeted me. I don't know what he thinks I did, and honestly, I'm scared to find out what he's planning next. The last few days have felt like I've been living inside someone else's nightmare. I barely leave my apartment anymore unless I absolutely have to. Every noise outside makes me tense up. Every car that drives slowly past my building makes my heart start racing. I've started keeping a kitchen knife next to my couch, which I know probably wouldn't help much. But it makes me feel slightly less helpless. After the police visit, I tried to return to some form of normal life. I forced myself to go back to work mostly because I had no choice financially. Missing shifts was already putting me behind on rent, and fear doesn't pay bills. The first night back felt unbearable. Every single car that pulled into the drive-thru made my stomach drop. I found myself studying every voice, every order, every silhouette through tinted windows. My hands were shaking so badly at one point that I dropped someone's drink at the second window. But he didn't show up that night, or the next after that. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe that maybe he had lost interest or moved on to someone else. I started convincing myself that maybe the rock through my window was his final warning and that he had decided I wasn't worth the trouble anymore. Then 5 nights after I returned to work, something happened that shattered that illusion completely. It was around 1:45 a.m. The drive-thru had been quiet for almost 20 minutes, which is pretty normal for that time of night. I was leaning against the counter, scrolling through my phone, when I heard a soft ding from the headset. A car had pulled up to the speaker. I forced myself to sound normal and asked for their order. There was silence. Not the normal hesitation people have when deciding what to order. This was different. The line stayed completely quiet for almost 10 seconds. Then I heard breathing. Slow, calm, intentional. My chest tightened instantly. I asked again if they were ready to order. That same familiar voice finally spoke. "Did you miss me, Mr. Hurley?" Every muscle in my body locked up. I couldn't even respond right away. I just stood there, gripping the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. Before I could say anything, he continued, "You didn't follow instructions." My voice cracked when I finally managed to speak. I told him I didn't have the money. I told him he was mistaken about whatever he thought I had done. I begged him to just leave me alone. He laughed. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, controlled, almost disappointed. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "You still don't remember, do you?" I kept asking him what he meant, but he ignored me. Instead, he ordered the same exact meal again, like nothing had happened. Large double Whopper with cheese. Coke. My hands were shaking so badly I almost entered the order incorrectly. When he pulled up to the payment window, he repeated the same behavior as always. Window barely lowered. Card slid out, face hidden behind dark tint. But this time I noticed something new. His sleeve pulled back slightly when he handed me the card, revealing part of his wrist. There was a tattoo there, a small black symbol. I couldn't fully make it out, but it looked like some kind of number or letter inside a circle. I tried to memorize it, but before I could focus, he pulled his hand back. I handed him the receipt, and just like every other time, he drove off without collecting the food. I immediately told my manager I felt sick and needed to step outside. I ended up sitting behind the building for almost 10 minutes trying not to throw up. I knew this wasn't random anymore. This guy clearly had some long-term plan, and somehow I was right in the middle of it. When my shift ended that morning, I noticed something waiting for me again. This time it wasn't at my apartment. It was taped to my car windshield. Another handwritten note. It read, "Memory is fragile. I'll help you remember." I didn't even drive home right away. I just sat in the parking lot staring at the note, trying to figure out if I was losing my mind. I started questioning everything. Every interaction I've had with strangers. Every argument, every accident. I even called my parents asking if something had happened in my past that I didn't know about. They thought I was joking. That was 2 nights ago. Yesterday, things escalated again. I received a phone call from an unknown number around noon. Normally, I don't answer calls like that, but something told me I needed to. I wish I hadn't. When I answered, there was silence for a few seconds. Then I heard that same breathing I recognized from the drive-through speaker. He said only one sentence. "Check your mailbox." Then hung up. I waited almost an hour before I built up the courage to go downstairs. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my keys trying to open the mailbox. Inside there was a small envelope. No postage, no address, just my name written in thick black ink. Inside the envelope was a printed photograph. It showed me, standing outside Burger King. But it wasn't recent. I was wearing a uniform shirt from my very first week working there. I remember because the shirt had a temporary name patch stitched on crookedly before they replaced it later. The photo had clearly been taken years ago from across the street, zoomed in. On the back of the photo were 3 words written in pen. "You were there." I don't know what it means. I don't know what he thinks I witnessed or forgot. But someone has apparently been watching me for years and I never even noticed. I haven't told the police about the photo yet. I don't know why. Maybe because part of me is terrified of what they might find out. Maybe because I'm starting to feel like whatever this is, it's personal. I keep replaying my past in my head, trying to find something, anything, that could explain this. But the harder I try to remember, the more frustrated I get. And the worst part? Last night I found another note slipped under my apartment door. It said, "2 days left. Try harder to remember." I don't know what happens when those 2 days run out. And honestly, I'm starting to think I really did forget something terrible. I haven't slept properly in days. Every time I close my eyes, my brain starts replaying moments from my life, trying to dig up something I might have buried or forgotten. I keep wondering if maybe I was involved in some accident. Maybe I hurt someone without realizing. Maybe I witnessed something and ran away. But no matter how hard I try, nothing comes back. The note saying 2 days left has been sitting on my kitchen counter like a countdown clock I can't turn off. I've checked my locks at least 10 times a night. I even pushed my couch against the front door, which I know is probably useless, but paranoia doesn't exactly follow logic. Yesterday was the first day of that countdown. Nothing happened during the day. No calls, no notes, no strange cars outside. The silence almost felt worse than the threats. By evening, I decided I couldn't sit around waiting anymore. I went to the police station and finally showed them everything. The notes, the photograph, the timeline of the drive-through encounters, everything. They took it more seriously this time, mostly because of the escalating threats and the property damage from the broken window. They told me they would try tracing surveillance cameras around my apartment and workplace. They also said they would attempt to pull transaction records from the credit card used at the restaurant. But they warned me that unless the card was stolen or directly linked to someone with a record, it could take time. Time is exactly what I don't feel like I have. That night I tried staying at a friend's apartment. I didn't tell him the full story, just that someone had been harassing me and I didn't feel safe staying alone. He let me crash on his couch, no questions asked. I thought maybe being somewhere else would throw the guy off. I was wrong. At around 3:15 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was just a photo. It showed the outside of my friend's apartment building, taken from across the street. My entire body went numb when I saw it. I ran to the window, heart pounding, but the street looked completely empty. No parked cars with headlights on, no figure standing in the shadows. Just silence. Then another text came through. You can't hide in someone else's life. I woke my friend up immediately and told him everything. He insisted on calling the police right away, but by the time officers arrived and searched the area, there was nothing to find. No suspicious vehicles, no witnesses, nothing. I barely spoke the rest of the night. This morning, the police called me with the first actual development since this whole thing started. They tracked the credit card. Sort of. The card used at Burger King had been reported stolen almost 3 years ago in another state. Since then, it had been used sporadically for small purchases across multiple cities. Mostly fast food, gas stations, convenience stores. Always late at night. No consistent location. No security footage clear enough to identify the person using it. It was like chasing a ghost. Hearing that made my stomach sink even deeper because it meant this person had likely been doing things like this for years. And I was just the latest target. Later in the afternoon, I forced myself to go back to my apartment to grab some clothes. I didn't want to stay there, but I needed more than what I had brought to my friend's place. The hallway outside my apartment looked normal at first, but as soon as I got closer to my door, I saw it. There was a small cardboard box sitting right in front of it. No shipping label, no markings. Just my apartment number written on top in black marker. I froze halfway down the hallway. My brain screamed at me not to touch it. I almost turned around and left, but curiosity, or maybe dread, kept me moving forward. I used my keys to nudge the box gently before picking it up. It wasn't very heavy, which somehow made it worse. I brought it inside and stared at it on my kitchen table for almost 5 minutes before opening it. Inside was another photograph. This one hit me harder than anything else so far. It showed a group of employees standing outside Burger King during what looked like some staff event or training day. I was in the photo, standing near the back, younger, skinnier, clearly new to the job. But that wasn't the part that made my heart stop. Standing next to me in the picture was another employee I barely recognized at first. Until I did. His name was Marcus. He had worked the night shift with me during my first month there. I hadn't thought about him in years. He stopped showing up to work suddenly, and management told everyone he had quit. On the back of the photo, there was another message. Last chance to remember Marcus. I dropped the photo like it burned me. I sat there trying to pull his face out of my memory. I remembered small things, like how quiet he was, how he always volunteered to close the kitchen, how he used to drive an old silver sedan. Then something else started creeping back into my mind, a memory I hadn't thought about in years. One night, early in my time working there, Marcus and I had closed together. I remember leaving the building after him. I remember seeing him arguing with someone in the parking lot. I never saw the other person's face, just a silhouette leaning against a dark car. I remember hearing shouting. I remember getting into my own car and driving away because I didn't want to get involved. And then, nothing. Marcus never came back to work after that night. I always assumed he quit. But now, I'm not so sure. As I sat there shaking, my phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. You left him there. I don't know what happened to Marcus. I don't know if he's alive or dead. But whoever is doing this clearly thinks I'm responsible for something that happened that night. And according to the countdown, tomorrow is the last day. I have a feeling that whatever happens next is going to force me to finally find out the truth.